A future history of how America's public lands became the world's proving ground for healthy beef. But first, a disclaimer. This is a FutureCast, a fictional exploration of one possible future based on current trends and emerging technologies. While the companies and technologies mentioned are real, the events described are speculative fiction intended to help visualize potential outcomes. Like any forward-looking statement, actual results may vary significantly. This is not investment advice, predictive analysis, or a guarantee of future events. Consider it a thought experiment in what could be possible if current innovations in food, agriculture, and health converge in transformative ways. Note: this email may be too long for your provider. Be sure to click the View on Web link to see the entire article. Important editorial note. We understand this FutureCast might be misinterpreted. The specifics of what the optimal diet entail are very controversial. There is much debate. As with all things related to this Substack, we do not wish to take a position. Instead, we are focused on finding tangible, unexpected opportunities within the systems and behaviors in place today to redesign the system to support this objective. What we are focused on is improving human health and ending the chronic disease epidemic while improving soil health and planetary health. Chapter 1. The View from 2038. Jackson Hole, Wyoming, October 15, 2038. R.C. Carter stood on the ridge overlooking 50,000 acres of BLM land, watching his autonomous herding system move 2,000 head of cattle in a pattern that would have made Alan Savory weep with joy. His phone buzzed with another notification from the AgriWeb platform. Soil carbon sequestration rate holding steady at 1.2 tons per acre per year. Microsoft's quarterly payment of $5 million had just been deposited into his account. Remember when they said regenerative ranching was just for hippies?
His wife Anya called out, stepping out of their solar-powered ranch house. Their eldest son, Cam, was visiting from his PhD program at Cornell, where he was pioneering soil microbiome genetics. The other kids, Will and True, were home from their respective programs in regenerative finance and agricultural technology.
R.C. smiled, remembering the desperate days of 2026, when land prices had locked them out despite years of successful ranching on private leases. The days when the full economic benefit of regenerative agriculture was finally quantified on both a human health and soil and planetary health basis through a combination of animals and non-animal crops. Now, Carter Country Meats was valued at $4.2 billion, making it the fair life of beef, a comparison he'd grown tired of but couldn't argue with. It was during those desperate days that the full economic benefit of regenerative agriculture was quantified on both a human health and soil and planetary health basis, through a combination of animals and non-animal crops. His phone rang. Kelly Garrett's name appeared on the screen.
RC, you watching the news? The Chinese just announced they're converting 100 million acres to our model. And get this, Joe wants me back on the podcast to explain how soil consciousness affects human consciousness.
Kelly's voice was excited. R.C. laughed. The Joe Rogan episode, where Kelly explained regenerative agriculture while Joe became progressively more amazed, had become the most watched podcast of 2034, beating even Elon Musk's announcement of the Mars colony.
Also, Senator Thompson just texted, the Medicare savings report is out. They're documenting $500 billion in reduced chronic disease costs since the Regenerative Rangelands Act passed. He says even Trump's calling it the best deal in the history of deals.
Kelly continued. As R.C. hung up, he looked out at the land again. The same land that had been overgrazed and dying just 12 years ago now pulsed with life. The native grasses had returned, the water ran clear, and the health impact of nutrient-dense regenerative beef and non-animal crops had changed for millions of Americans. The transformation had seemed impossible, but then again, the impossible had a funny way of becoming inevitable when you combined American innovation with 245 million acres of opportunity. Chapter 2. The Catalyst Event. Washington, D.C., May 3, 2026. Dr. Marcus Thompson had been a senator for exactly 97 days when the report landed on his desk. The freshman Republican from South Dakota, a small-town physician who'd ridden Trump's endorsement to victory, stared at the data in disbelief.
Chronic disease rates up 340% since 1990. Healthcare costs consume 28% of GDP. Average American male testosterone down 60%. And we're not looking at the nutrient density of our food sources.
His chief of staff, a young woman named Amy Chen, who'd left McKinsey to work on his campaign, looked up from her laptop.
Sir, there's something else. That new research from South Dakota State just published. The Mason study on rotational grazing and soil carbon.
Thompson pulled up the study. Dr. Emily Mason's team had proven that properly managed rotational grazing could sequester 1.5 tons of carbon per acre annually while increasing the nutrient density of beef by 280%. The kicker? Ranchers using these methods were profitable without subsidies.
Amy, get me the numbers on BLM land utilization.
The data was stark. 245 million acres, generating less revenue than a mid-sized shopping mall. Grazing fees hadn't been updated since 1966. Most lessees were barely breaking even, many abandoning their allotments. Thompson's phone buzzed, a text from his daughter in California. "Dad, my Crohn's is back. Doc wants to start me on biologics." He thought about the rancher he'd met during the campaign. R.C. Carter, a successful operator in his late 40s who'd built a thriving business on BLM leases but couldn't afford the astronomical prices to buy his own land. He thought about the concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOS, large-scale industrial animal farms that confine a high number of animals for meat, milk, or egg production, pumping out cheap beef that only exacerbates chronic disease. He thought about his daughter. Kiss the Ground, Common Ground, and the third film Groundswell, released on Amazon Prime with over 50 million views, laid the foundation and changed thinking. The biggest aspirational desire and trend was regenerative food, aimed at regenerating soil and consumers' health. People were looking for better answers.
Amy, what if we could improve human health, climate change, and rural poverty with one bill?
He said slowly. She raised an eyebrow.
That's quite a claim, Senator.
Get me meetings with the Interior Secretary, the head of BLM, and Kelly Garrett from Calibrated Agronomy. And Nick Voss, the one doing those incredible things with dry land restoration.
He paused, knowing this next request would raise flags.
The agriculture lobby is about to learn that there's more money in healing land than destroying it.
Chapter 3. The Science Revolution. Earth Optics Laboratory, Boulder, Colorado. August 17, 2027. Dr. Lars Dyrud hadn't slept in 36 hours, but he didn't care. The satellite data streaming across his screens was about to change everything.
Holy shit, is that real?
His lead engineer whispered, staring at the false color images. The images showed two adjacent BLM allotments in Nevada. On the left, traditional continuous grazing had left the land brown and barren, reflecting heat like asphalt. On the right, where Nick Voss had been running his experimental mixed-species rotation, cattle following his genetically selected Dorper sheep, the land glowed green with life. Not far down the road from similar experimental non-animal regenerative crops with the same results.
"Run the carbon calculations again,"
Lars ordered. The numbers came back the same. 1.8 tons of CO2 sequestered per acre per year. At current carbon prices, that was $54 per acre in annual revenue. Add in the premium beef prices, and suddenly ranching math completely changed. Lars picked up his phone and called Senator Thompson. They'd met at a climate tech conference where Thompson had surprised everyone by showing up and asking detailed questions about measurement, verification, and blockchain integration.
"Senator, we've cracked it. We can measure soil carbon changes from space with 94% accuracy. Every ton sequestered, every improvement in water infiltration, every increase in biodiversity. We can track it all in real time.
How soon can you scale?
If we had the contracts, 6 months to cover every BLM acre in the country.
Start building capacity. I'll get you the contracts.
Meanwhile, at the Holobiome lab in Boston, Dr. Priya Patel was making her own discovery. The gut microbiome samples from individuals consuming regeneratively raised beef exhibited remarkable differences from those consuming conventional beef, including increased microbial diversity and other markers.
It's as if the health of the soil microbiome transfers through the cattle to the human microbiome. We're not just what we eat. We're what our food eats,
She told her team. Meat was a key priority for the Surgeon General's plan to shift Americans towards food care, with early disruptors like Nutrisense and Heartland Mart prioritizing affordable nutrition centered on consuming a diet high in whole plant foods, such as vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and balanced portions of meat, of which beef remained a key staple. At Audacious, sensors in Kelly Garrett's test processing facility were revealing equally stunning data. Beef from cattle raised on recovering grasslands and finished on a diverse ration of nutrient-dense grains and forages showed omega-3 levels rivaling wild salmon, CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, concentrations 300% higher than grain-fed, improved antioxidant levels, and complete amino acid profiles. The science was converging from every angle. Soil health, animal health, and human health were interrelated. And that system could be measured, verified, and optimized. Chapter 4. The Political Battle. U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C., February 12, 2028. Senator Thompson stood before the Agriculture Committee, knowing that half the room wanted him destroyed. The KFO lobby had spent $47 million trying to kill his Regenerative Rangelands Act, but he had something more powerful than money: data.
Senators, I'm not here as a politician. I'm here as a doctor who took an oath to first do no harm, and we are harming our people with our current food system.
He clicked to his first slide. Chronic disease rates overlaid with the growth of industrial agriculture.
My daughter had Crohn's disease. Had. Past tense. 6 months on a diet of nutrient-dense food from regeneratively managed land, and she's off all medications. Her gastroenterologist at Stanford has documented complete mucosal healing.
The committee room was silent.
But this isn't about one anecdote. Medicare spent $1.2 trillion last year, mostly on preventable chronic diseases. We have 31 million Americans with diabetes. Cancer rates are exploding. And we're subsidizing the very foods making people sick while letting 245 million acres of public land waste away.
Senator Patricia Walsh from Iowa, whose campaign was heavily funded by Tyson Foods, interrupted.
Senator Thompson, are you seriously suggesting we abandon American agriculture?
Thompson smiled.
I'm suggesting we make it more profitable. R.C. Carter, an experienced rancher locked out of land ownership by inflated prices, netted $400,000 last year on just 10,000 leased acres using regenerative methods. The average CAFO operates on 2% margins. Who's really serving American agriculture?
He clicked to the next slide. Projections from Earth Optics and Microsoft.
Tech companies need carbon credits. Real ones, not accounting tricks. They're willing to pay $80 to $110 per ton. BLM land could sequester 350 million tons annually. That's $28 to $38 billion in new revenue. Per year. Forever.
The room erupted. Thompson let them argue, then raised his hand.
The president himself called me yesterday. Want to know what he said? Marcus, I made the greatest deals in history, but making Microsoft pay ranchers to raise better beef while fixing the climate. That's genius. Plus, it pisses off Bill Gates and his fake meat. I'm in.
Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Even the Democrats couldn't help but smile.
The bill is simple. BLM lessees who meet verified regenerative standards can claim 80% of carbon credit revenue. The other 20% funds rural infrastructure and measurement systems. Leases are competitive, based on ecological outcomes, not political connections. And we establish a USDA certification program for regenerative beef and look for programs for non-animal crops supporting the same.
Senator Walsh tried again.
The processing infrastructure doesn't exist. This is fantasy.
Thompson's aide handed him a tablet.
Senators, I'm pleased to announce that Walmart, Costco, and Amazon Fresh have committed $2 billion to build regenerative certified processing facilities. They've seen the consumer data. Regenerative beef outsells conventional 3-to-1 when available, even at 40% premiums.
The vote was closer than he'd hoped, 14-12, but it was enough to send it to the floor. That night, Thompson's phone buzzed with a text from R.C. Carter. Senator, you just changed my life, and about 10,000 other experienced ranchers who've been waiting for land access we can afford. Chapter 5. The Early Adopters. BLM Field Office, Miles City, Montana, June 5, 2028. The line stretched around the block. Over 500 applications for the first 50 competitive, regenerative leases in Montana. R.C. Carter stood near the front, his business plan refined from 20 years of successful ranching on private land. Behind him, an unlikely coalition had formed. Fifth-generation ranchers stood next to tech workers from Seattle. Young indigenous ranchers chatted with former Wall Street analysts, and military veterans compared notes with sustainable agriculture graduates.
Never thought I'd see the day. BLM actually rewarding good land management instead of just collecting tiny checks,
muttered Jim Harrison, a 67-year-old rancher who'd held the same lease for 40 years. R.C. had spent months preparing his application with help from Kelly Garrett and the team at Calibrated Agronomy. The plan was ambitious but grounded in his decades of experience. Mixed species grazing using Nick Voss's desert-adapted genetics. AgriWeb's AI-powered virtual fencing for precise rotation. Organic soil treatments to jumpstart microbiology. Direct-to-consumer sales through a branded program. Carbon credit pre-sales to Microsoft and Google. Earth optics, accurate sequestered carbon data.
Next,
Called the BLM officer. R.C. stepped forward, heart pounding. This was it, the chance to finally scale the operation he'd perfected on expensive private leases. 3 hours later, he emerged with a 30-year regenerative lease on 15,000 acres. The terms were revolutionary. Base rent of $5 per AUM, up from $1.35, but with performance incentives that could reduce it to zero. If he hit carbon targets, he'd keep 80% of credit revenues. Miss them, and he'd lose the lease.
Fair's fair. If I can't heal this land, I don't deserve it,
he told Anya on the phone. By August, the first cohort of regenerative lessees was moving cattle onto degraded BLM land across the West. The herd dog platform, Uber for cattle as TechCrunch called it, connected them with neighboring farmers who wanted managed grazing on their crop residues, and partnering with those same farmers as they found new opportunities for non-animal crops through the same bill and on BLM land.
It's beautiful. My cattle are improving Iowa corn ground while I'm getting paid by both the farmer and Microsoft. The algorithms optimize grazing patterns better than any human could,
texted Mark Chen, a former Google engineer now running 8,000 head across 3 states. The early results shocked everyone. Within 120 days, bare ground decreased by 40%. Water infiltration rates doubled. Native grass species returned. Nutrient-dense crops ready to harvest. Wildlife sightings increased 300%. The first carbon credit verifications came in above projections. Kelly Garrett's phone rang constantly with ranchers wanting help. His Calibrated Agronomy team worked 18-hour days, teaching soil biology, grazing planning, and direct marketing.
we're not just changing how we ranch, we're changing who can ranch. For the first time in a century, experienced operators locked out by land prices have a path to scale.
Kelly told a packed workshop in Billings. Chapter 6. The Business Model Revolution. Austin, Texas, March 20th, 2029. The South by Southwest panel was standing room only. R.C. Carter, now 51 and CEO of the fastest-growing beef company in America, sat between Mark Cuban and the CEO of Tyson Foods.
Look, everyone asks how we became the fair life of beef in 3 years. It's simple. We solved a different problem. Fairlife makes milk last longer. We made beef that could restore land.
R.C. said, adjusting his worn Stetson that had become his trademark. The audience laughed, but R.C. was serious.
Our average customer has been with us for 18 months. Our beef is part of a whole, regeneratively grown, nutrient-dense offering that is yielding an average health improvement documented by their doctors, including 20-pound weight loss, 50% reduction in inflammatory markers, and 80% report better mental clarity. We're part of a new pharma culinary line that happens to taste amazing.
Cuban leaned forward.
But how do you scale? You can't run cattle on every piece of BLM land.
R.C. smiled.
Watch us. We just closed Series B funding, $200 million from a consortium including Founders Fund, Kozla Ventures, and Tyson Foods.
He paused for effect. The Tyson CEO, Margaret Chen, nodded.
We can fight the future or fund it. Our shareholders are very clear about which they prefer.
The business model was elegant. Land access through competitive BLM leases based on ecological outcomes. Verification by Earth optics satellites, plus audacious quality sensors. Carbon revenue pre-sold to tech companies for 10 years. Premium product through direct-to-consumer plus institutional sales. Network effects with herd dog platform creating grazing opportunities everywhere.
The numbers are stupid good. Traditional ranching, maybe $50 per acre net. Our model, $200 to $300 per acre between beef premiums, carbon credits, and ecosystem service payments. And that's before the healthcare savings.
R.C. continued.
An audience member asked about processing infrastructure.
Great question. Mobile processing units, USDA certified, powered by the solar panels we're installing on grazing lands. Each unit can process 50 head per day. We have 20 operating, 100 on order, funded entirely by carbon credit advances.
Cuban shook his head.
I've invested in a lot of companies. Never seen one where doing the right thing is also the most profitable thing.
That's because we finally started accounting for the real costs. When you price in healthcare, environmental damage, and rural poverty, industrial agriculture is the most expensive system ever created. We're just the first to build a business model based on reality.
R.C. replied. After the panel, R.C.'s phone buzzed with orders. Whole Foods, 10,000 pounds per week. Google Cafeterias, exclusive supplier agreement. Cleveland Clinic, pilot program for cardiac patients. U.S. military, testing for deployment rations. Ania texted him.
The Nebraska lease auction just closed. We got all 100,000 acres. Herd delivery starts Monday.
R.C. smiled. 20 years of building expertise on expensive private land had prepared them for this moment. Now Carter Country Meats was on track for $500 million in revenue. But the best part? They were just getting started. Chapter 7. The Consumer Awakening. Los Angeles, California, November 8th, 2030. Dr. Patricia Liu couldn't believe what she was seeing. The functional MRI scans spread across her desk showed something that shouldn't be possible. Significant improvements in brain inflammation markers after just 12 weeks.
Run the statistics again. This can't be right,
she told her research team at UCLA. But it was. The study participants, all diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's, had shown remarkable cognitive improvement after switching to a regenerative diet, including beef from Carter Country Meats and similar producers.
The omega-3s, the complete amino acid profiles, the micronutrients, It's like they're eating a completely different food than conventional beef.
Dr. Liu muttered, studying the nutritional analysis. Her phone rang.
Dr. Liu? This is Jake Morrison from Netflix. We've been following your research. How would you feel about participating in a documentary?
The documentary, titled Sacred Cow, Sacred Crops, Sacred Soil, would go on to win 3 Emmys and an Oscar. But more importantly, it would spark a consumer revolution that made organic food look like a dress rehearsal. The film followed 5 families. The Johnsons from Detroit, whose autistic son began speaking in sentences after 6 months on regenerative food. Maria Gonzalez, the former DOI administrator who'd helped pass the Regenerative Rangelands Act, reversing her own type 2 diabetes. The Thompson family, showing Senator Thompson's daughter thriving 5 years after her Crohn's diagnosis. A professional athlete who broke world records after switching to regenerative sources. R.C. and Anya Carter, showing their journey from landlocked ranchers to agricultural revolutionaries. But the breakout star was Kelly Garrett, whose appearance on Joe Rogan had already primed millions for the message.
Joe, it's actually simple. Soil is a living ecosystem. When it's healthy, it grows healthy plants. Healthy plants feed healthy animals. Healthy animals feed healthy people. We broke that chain with industrial agriculture. We're just reconnecting it,
Kelly had said, leaning into the microphone.
But dude, you're telling me eating the right food could be better than supplements.
Rogan had responded.
I'm telling you that a cow eating diverse plants on living soil is the most sophisticated nutritional technology on Earth. We just forgot how to use it.
The 3-hour episode broke download records. Regenerative beef. Regenerative crops trended for weeks. Sales of Carter Country meats and similar brands exploded 400%. But the real tipping point came from an unexpected source: a leaked internal memo from Pfizer. Chronic disease reduction in regenerative food consumption markets poses a significant risk to recurring revenue models. Recommend immediate diversification into the nutritional therapeutics sector. When the memo hit Reddit, it confirmed what millions had started to suspect. They'd been sold sickness, and the cure had been regenerative crops and grazing in front of them all along. By December 2030, Costco announced that 50% of its beef would be regenerative certified by 2032. Amazon created a climate hero food category. Even McDonald's launched a test of the Macregan burger in 1,000 locations. The consumer had awakened, and they were hungry for change. Chapter 8. The Resistance and the Converts. Chicago, Illinois, April 3, 2031. The boardroom at JBS Foods felt like a war council. CEO Robert Anderson stared at the quarterly reports showing their first loss in company history.
Gentlemen, we have a problem. Regenerative beef now commands 31% market share. Our conventional operations are losing $2 million per day.
The CMO spoke first.
Consumer perception has completely shifted. We're seen as the cigarette companies of food.
Then we buy them out. Carter Country is valued at what? $8 billion? We can afford it, shouted the head of M&A.
I called R.C. Carter personally. He laughed and said he wouldn't sell if we offered $50 billion. Said something about not selling out the soil.
Anderson interrupted. The room fell silent. Then, from the corner, a young voice spoke up. Maria Rodriguez, recently hired from Stanford Business School, had been brought in to understand the regenerative thing.
What if we don't fight them? What if we join them?
Anderson's glare could have melted steel.
Explain.
We have the infrastructure they need. Processing facilities, distribution networks, retail relationships. They have the production model of the future. JBS could transition 20% of our supply chain to regenerative within 18 months. We'd lose margin initially, but we'd survive, and eventually thrive,
she said. 6 weeks later, JBS announced the largest agricultural transition in history: a $10 billion investment in regenerative conversion, partnerships with Earth Optics and Miraterra for verification, and a commitment to source 50% of its products regeneratively by 2035. The dominoes fell fast. Tyson created a regenerative division, hiring Kelly Garrett as chief soil officer. Cargill launched a 1,000-farm pilot program. Smithfield Foods partnered with indigenous tribes to transition 2 million acres.
You know what the beautiful irony is? They're not doing it to save the world. They're doing it because the market demands it. Capitalism is fixing what capitalism broke.
RC told Anya over dinner, reading about JBS's announcement. But not everyone converted willingly. The Corn Growers Association launched a campaign claiming regenerative grazing would destroy crop yields. Senator Walsh from Iowa held hearings on the regenerative hoax. The opposition's last stand came at the 2031 Farm Bill debate. Traditional agriculture lobbyists pushed for amendments that would kill carbon credit programs and restrict BLM lease reforms. Then something unexpected happened. At a packed hearing, Alan Savory, now 95 years old, was wheeled in to testify. The grandfather of regenerative grazing had stayed quiet during the political battles, but now he spoke.
Senators, I've spent 70 years trying to heal land. I've been called a heretic, a fool, a dreamer. But now, people like R.C. Carter, Kelly Garrett, and Nick Voss are proving what I always knew. We don't have to choose between feeding humanity and healing Earth. The choice is false. The young ones are showing us the way. Please, don't let old thinking stop new solutions.
The room stood in ovation. Even Senator Walsh wiped away tears. The Farm Bill passed with full regenerative support, 87-13. Chapter 9. The Scaling Moment. Yellowstone National Park adjacent. BLM land, July 4, 2032. Now Agriculture Secretary, Dr. Thompson himself had come for the ribbon cutting. The scene was surreal. 500,000 acres of formerly degraded BLM land, now teeming with life, about to be officially designated as the first regenerative heritage range.
My fellow Americans, 6 years ago, people said I was crazy to support this. They said turning over our public lands to carbon credits and fancy grazing was a scam. Well, guess what? We were right. They were wrong. And America is winning bigger than ever.
Thompson began, his voice carrying across the crowd of ranchers, politicians, and tech executives. The crowd erupted. Behind him, a massive screen showed the numbers. 50 million acres converted to regenerative management. Record nutrient density levels in regeneratively managed crops. 600 million tons of CO2 sequestered annually. $18 billion in carbon credit revenue to rural communities. Healthcare costs down $347 billion. Rural unemployment at historic lows.
And the best part, we made big tech pay for it. Microsoft, Google, Amazon. They're funding the greatest land restoration in history. And you know what? Their customers love it.
Thompson continued. R.C. Carter stood in the VIP section, still uncomfortable with the attention. Carter Country Meats had just gone public at a $15 billion valuation. He'd kept 51% and distributed 10% to his employees. Every cowboy and meat cutter was now a millionaire on paper. Kelly Garrett leaned over.
Remember when we thought getting to 1 million acres would be impossible?
Now the impossible feels inevitable,
R.C. replied. The scaling had accelerated beyond anyone's projections. Technology with herd dog managing 10 million head across 30 states. Genetics using Nick Voss's desert-adapted herds thriving on marginal lands. Verification by Earth Optics tracking every ton of carbon in real time. Market with regenerative beef commanding 50% plus premiums consistently. Infrastructure with 1,000 mobile processing units operating nationwide. But the real acceleration came from an unexpected source. Churches. Healing God's creation while feeding his people became a rallying cry across rural America. Church groups organized grazing cooperatives, Youth groups learned soil biology, and Sunday sermons connected soil health to human health.
It's become a movement, not political, not environmental, but moral. People finally understand that how we treat land is how we treat ourselves,
Dr. Thompson told the president. The president nodded, then leaned into the microphone for her closing.
They said American agriculture was dying. They said our rural communities were finished. They said we had to choose between profit and planet. Well, we chose both.
As fireworks exploded over the regenerated landscape, R.C. felt Anya's hand slip into his.
We actually did it,
she whispered.
No, we're just getting started,
R.C. said, watching thousands of cattle moving across healthy land under the stars. Chapter 10. System Effects. Boston Medical Center, October 14, 2033. Dr. James Washington, an emergency physician for 20 years, had never seen anything like the data on his screen.
Diabetes admissions down 64%. Cardiac events reduced by 51%. Autoimmune flare-ups nearly eliminated. And this is just from the neighborhoods with high regenerative food consumption?
His colleague, Dr. Patricia Liu, now famous from the Netflix documentary, nodded.
The correlation is undeniable. We mapped purchase data from Carter Country Meats and similar brands against hospital admissions. The pattern is consistent across every demographic.
The system effects were cascading through society in ways nobody had fully anticipated. Healthcare. Insurance companies offered 20% premium discounts for verified regenerative diets. Medicare announced $400 billion in projected savings. Pharmaceutical companies pivoted to food as medicine subsidiaries. Mental health improvements reduced antidepressant prescriptions by 40%. Education. Schools serving regenerative beef reported 45% improvement in test scores. ADHD diagnoses dropped by half. Soil-to-student programs taught agriculture in urban schools. Universities created regenerative MBA programs. Criminal justice. Juvenile facilities switching to regenerative diets saw 70% reduction in violence. Recidivism rates plummeted when ex-inmates were hired by ranching operations. Healing land, healing lives, became a national rehabilitation model. Economic. Rural property values increased 300%. Small towns saw their first population growth in decades. Native American tribes became the largest carbon credit sellers. Young people flooded into agriculture. Ranching is the new coding. The Stanford economist who'd predicted disaster published a mea culpa. I was wrong about regenerative agriculture. It's not just sustainable. It's the greatest economic opportunity of our lifetime. But the most profound change was cultural. At the Global Climate Summit in Dubai, the U.S. delegation presented data showing that American agriculture had become carbon negative. The world was stunned.
How?
Asked the Chinese delegate. Secretary Thompson smiled.
We stopped fighting nature and started copying it. Turns out, 100 million years of evolution knows something about efficiency.
Within months, regenerative programs launched worldwide. Australia with 200 million acres transitioned. Brazil with Amazon-adjacent ranching and farming going regenerative. Mongolia with traditional herders adopting high-tech verification. EU mandated 50% regenerative by 2040. Back in Boston, Dr. Washington pulled up one more chart, this one from the Miraterra microbiome studies.
Look at this. The gut bacteria of people eating regeneratively match those of indigenous populations from a century ago. We didn't create something new. We rediscovered what we lost.
His pager buzzed. Another quiet night in the ER. He smiled, remembering the chaos of just 5 years ago.
You know what the craziest part is? The solution was always there. Grazing animals on healthy land. Sometimes the most advanced technology is the oldest wisdom.
Chapter 11. The New Giants. San Francisco, California, May 22, 2034. The IPO was the largest in agricultural history. Carter Country Meats hit the public markets at a $42 billion valuation, with R.C. Carter ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange via satellite from his Montana ranch.
We're staying true to our roots, literally. Every decision we make starts with soil health and ends with human health. Wall Street's just catching up to what our customers already know.
R.C. told CNBC. The landscape of American agriculture had transformed completely. The new giants, Carter Country Meats with $8 billion revenue, 2 million acres under management. Regenerative Foods, Collective, a farmer-owned cooperative with 50,000 members. Sacred Soil Brands, a Native American-led company managing 10 million acres. Garrett Agricultural Systems, Kelly's consulting firm worth $2 billion. The Converted, JBS Regenerative now sourced 60% from verified operations. Tyson True Earth was the fastest-growing division in company history. McDonald's had 100% regenerative beef in 15,000 locations. Walmart was the largest retailer of regenerative products globally. The Disruptors. Herd Dog managed 50 million head, valued at $20 billion. Earth Optics was the Google Maps of soil carbon. Holobiome had microbiome testing in every major grocery chain. Edacious was the nutrient density verification industry standard. But the real power shift was generational. The average age of BLM lessees had dropped from 64 to 34. Young ranchers with technology skills and ecological knowledge were outcompeting traditional operations everywhere.
It's not that we're smarter. We just don't have the mental baggage. We see land as a living system, not a commodity,
explained Maria Chen, a 28-year-old former Tesla engineer now running 100,000 acres in Nevada. The old guard adapted or disappeared. The American Cattlemen's Association elected R.C. Carter as their youngest president ever. His first act was to rename it the American Regenerative Ranchers Association.
Words matter. We're not just raising cattle. We're raising soil, raising communities, raising health,
he told the membership. The finance world had fully embraced the model. Regenerative land. REITs managed $100 billion in assets. Carbon credit futures traded on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Soil wealth became a new asset class. Harvard's endowment allocated 20% to regenerative agriculture. Kelly Garrett's appearance on the cover of Fortune with the headline, "The Soil Whisperer, How a Farm Boy Became Agriculture's Most Important Thought Leader," marked a cultural moment. His book, Dirt Rich, The Regenerative Revolution, spent 52 weeks at #1. But the most telling sign of transformation was what happened at the 2034 Super Bowl. When Carter Country Meats ran an ad showing their cattle healing land, followed by families healing at dinner tables, it wasn't seen as marketing, it was seen as truth. The tagline entered the cultural lexicon, "Beef so good, it heals the land that made it." The old giants of agriculture were gone, replaced by companies that measured success in soil organic matter as much as profit margins. And profit margins had never been higher. Chapter 12. Global Transformation. Beijing, China, September 9, 2035. Minister Jiang Wei stood before the Politburo, presenting what would become known as the American Model Report.
Comrades, the Americans have achieved what we thought impossible. They've made environmental restoration profitable. Their rural communities are thriving. Their healthcare costs are plummeting. And their agricultural exports now command premium prices globally.
The room was silent. China had spent decades pursuing industrial agriculture with devastating environmental consequences. Now, American regenerative beef was selling in Shanghai for $100 per pound and selling out daily.
Our analysis shows that implementing similar programs on our grasslands could sequester 2 billion tons of carbon annually while reducing our healthcare burden by 30%.
Zhang continued. Within 6 months, China announced the Great Green Restoration. 500 million acres transitioning to regenerative management, with Earth Optics and Miraterra contracted for verification. The global cascade was unstoppable. India launched regenerative programs combining cattle with traditional farming. Russia converted Siberian rangelands into carbon sequestration engines. The African Union created the Savory Protocol, honoring Alan Savory's work. EU mandated regenerative certification for all beef imports. At the UN Climate Summit in New York, something unprecedented happened. The US, China, India, and Russia jointly announced the Soil Peace Treaty, competing for who could sequester the most carbon through regenerative agriculture.
We've turned climate competition into climate cooperation. Every nation wants their soil to be the healthiest,
Secretary Thompson announced. R.C. Carter was invited to address the UN General Assembly, a surreal moment for someone who'd spent decades building expertise on leased land before finally accessing BLM acres.
Distinguished delegates, 8 years ago, land prices had locked my family out despite our experience and success. Today, we help manage 20 million acres healing Earth, not through technology alone, not through policy alone, but through remembering what we forgot. Work with nature, not against it.
He paused, looking out at representatives from 195 nations.
Every culture has sacred stories about land and food. We forgot those stories in pursuit of cheap calories. But the land remembers, the soil remembers, and when we remember, miracles happen.
The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. By year's end, global metrics showed atmospheric CO2 levels dropping for first time in human history. Biodiversity indices recovering on every continent. Rural poverty decreasing worldwide. Chronic disease rates plummeting globally. The Lancet published a special issue, The Regenerative Revolution, How Beef Saved Both Human and Planetary Health. The leading article's conclusion became prophetic. Future historians will mark 2035 as the year humanity remembered that health is indivisible: soil, animal, human, planet. The American experiment proved what indigenous wisdom always knew: heal the land, heal the people. Epilogue: The View from 2040. Yellowstone adjacent BLM land, June 21, 2040. Kelly Garrett, now 65 with silver threading through his beard, stood beside R.C. Carter on the same ridge where the president had spoken 8 years earlier. The landscape was unrecognizable. Where brittle, bare earth had dominated, now waves of native grasses rippled to the horizon.
Remember when people said we were crazy?
Kelly asked. R.C., now 62, smiled.
Now they say it was inevitable.
The numbers told the story. 200 million acres of BLM land in regenerative management. Healthcare costs down 60% from 2025 peaks. Rural communities experiencing a second Homestead Act boom. American regenerative beef feeding 2 billion people globally. Atmospheric CO2 at lowest levels since 1987. But the human stories mattered more. Senator Thompson, now 78, had just published his memoir, The Doctor's Prescription: How Beef Healed America. His daughter, thriving and healthy, was running for Congress on a platform of food as medicine. Nick Voss, now 70, had seen his desert restoration techniques reclaim 50 million acres of degraded land worldwide. He'd been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. The young indigenous ranchers who'd started on small allotments now managed vast territories, their traditional knowledge combined with cutting-edge technology creating the most productive lands on Earth. Carter Country Meats had become the largest food company in the world, but RC had kept it mission-driven. Every employee was an owner. Every decision started with soil health.
You know what the best part is? We proved that doing right and doing well aren't opposites. They're the same thing, viewed from different angles.
RC said, watching his children, Cam back from his postdoc at MIT, and Will and True launching their regenerative investment fund, continuing the work they'd grown up witnessing. Kelly nodded, then pulled out his phone.
Speaking of which, Joe Rogan wants us back on. says his audience is asking about quantum consciousness in soil bacteria.
They both laughed. Some things never changed. As the sun set over the regenerated landscape, painting the healthy soil in shades of gold, the truth was undeniable. They'd changed the world by remembering what it meant to be human. Caretakers of land, nourishers of life, healers of what was broken. The revolution hadn't come through protests or politics, but through the simple act of grazing animals the way nature intended. The most radical act had been the most ancient one. And in that paradox lay the hope for humanity's future. Sometimes, the way forward is the way back. The land was healed, the people were healed, and the future finally tasted good.